everybody. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Out of This World podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Haas. We have a really cool presentation tonight for our viewers and listeners on Out of This World podcast. We have a big roundtable, Mothman Roundtable tonight. So if you notice, we didn't do any big introduction of Out of This World. Uh, we're doing a little bit different setup with our technology this week. Hopefully, everybody can hear and see everything okay. If not, please message us. Let us know. Can't exactly listen live if we have any issues. We have really bad reverb, and I don't think anybody wants to hear any bad reverb. So, without further ado, I want to introduce all of our guests tonight. We have Rich and Jackie from Phenomenology Researchers. They also have a book they co-authored together, Bridging the Tragedy. We have Susy Bastille. I hopefully didn't mispronounce your last name.
Bastille.
Okay. Yeah. So we have Susie. She I don't know if I pronounce the term properly with the research you do. Pugwudgie. How do you pronounce that?
You got it, Puckwudgie.
Pugwudgie. Okay. I wasn't sure, but I wanted to make sure I sounded that correctly. She does a lot of research into that, as well as a little bit of the Mothman. We have Steve Ward. We call him the Mothman Guru. Works part time at the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is a great place. If you haven't been, I highly recommend. They had just had a festival not too long ago, and I believe Steve, I heard you reached a maximum of over 30,000 people.
Yeah, they said that over about 33,000 people came through on that weekend on Saturday and Sunday. So,
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Of
no,
course,
congrats
they
on
all came there to see Richard Hatem, I think.
that. Yeah, and
Well,
that's my next. Yeah, no, that's
I
my
was just
next.
going to say, it was the first year I was there. I mean, I don't want to, claim
So
anything, connect dots, but okay. I mean, Steve said it, not me.
Yeah,
love them,
that's the
or
word on the
hate them.
street, anyway.
Love them or hate them. We have writer, producer. We have Rich. Hate him, not hate him. We love him. So we have Rich on board here, part of the Mothman Roundtable. If you don't know him, you should, because you got to see the movie Mothman Prophecies. That's the movie he had a big hand in writing. It's a great movie. He did a lot of great work with that. It's one of my favorite movies because the research that you did, Rich, for that was just obviously it was based on the book by John Keel, who was a prominent figure in all this. And welcome aboard to the roundtable, Rich.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, we're gonna be on this for like around 2 hours. So, briefly, if everybody who's not familiar with you guys on Out of This World podcast, my viewers and listeners that don't know you, I know you guys, but I shared an advertisement of a little bit of your background. But if you can tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself, we'll start with Bill on the top there, and we'll work our way down. Susie, you'll go next. Jackie, Steve, and then Rich. So. Bill, go ahead. You go first. A little bit about yourself. Tell everybody, your involvement with the Mothman.
Sure. Thanks again, Matthew. Appreciate you having us on here tonight with the panel. Like I told Rich, and like I've mentioned on pretty much every interview I've ever given, the movie Mothman Prophecies truly changed my life. I mean, at that point, when I saw it for the first time, I was kind of a little bit away from the paranormal, although, most of my life I was interested, but it really kind of pulled me back in. And when I say it pulled me back in, I dove into John Keel's work, The Mothman Prophecies, and then followed that up with everything I could get my hands on that Keel wrote, Cray Barker, other similar authors, et cetera, et cetera. And Jackie and I finally, after researching the whole Mothman phenomenon for over 10 years, went to Point Pleasant, and we had the occasion to meet Carolyn Harris. And Carolyn was the co-founder with Jeff Wamsley of the Mothman Festival. We became very close to her very quickly. And then as we wanted to get back to getting in front of her again and perhaps interview her for a story, unfortunately, she passed away before we could do that. But since we were so connected to her, we kept returning back to Point Pleasant. And over the next several years, decided we wanted to write a book from a psychological perspective, a scientific research project that was able to kind of highlight what happened with the Silver Bridge disaster by interviewing people who had been through that disaster, lost family members and friends, etc., but also some people who had had Mothman and paranormal encounters as well. The goal was to focus on the good outcomes that happen in these people's lives. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Sure. Susie, go ahead. You're next.
Yep. So, like you mentioned, my main area of focus is pukwudgies, which, for anyone that doesn't know, that is the term in my region, New England, for little people. So, something along the lines of elves, gnomes, that sort of thing. I've been into that since I was a child. I got into Keel more recently, and Mothman specifically, when I started to realize there were some parallels with what I was seeing researching pukwudgies in the Bridgewater Triangle up here. And also, Keel had come to similar conclusions as I did when I was, up here, boots on the ground, researching, where are these things coming from? Because they seem to be, using some sort of energy to kind of manifest here. Where do they come from? Where do they go? That sort of thing. And then Steve sucked me down the John Keel rabbit hole completely.
Yeah,
I take full responsibility.
I hope so. That's a long, dark rabbit hole. So, Jackie, you're next.
I am the co-author of Bridging the Tragedy and work with my husband researching paranormal and trauma. And I am also an investigator, but I don't do as much investigating as I would like to do. I do more research. My specialty is basically connecting the dots between intuition, perception, and reality. And I like to use the phrase or the quote actually from the Mothman Prophecy movie that was said by Indrid Cold. What do you look like? It all depends on who is looking. And that's kind of where that falls in line with it, with the intuition, the perception, and the reality.
Nice. I like that quote a lot too. Yeah. So go ahead, Steve.
I was just a kid in Michigan in 1966 when there was a big UFO flap in March of that year. That even Dr. J. Allen Hynek came down to check out when he was still attached to Project Blue Book. The following November was the first major sighting of the Mothman, where it chased two couples down Route 62 out of the infamous TNT area. I actually live on that road right now. Little did I know that decades hence I'd be living there. And so over the years, I was like Bill, I was following John Keel and some of the articles he would write in magazines, and several of his books came out when I had my peak interest in UFOs and so forth. And John Keel and also Jacques Vallée really shaped my thinking over time. I started coming down years later to the Mothman festivals, and 3.5 years ago, I actually moved down here from Michigan. So there's a lot more detail than that, but I don't want to keep you here till next Thursday. But little did I know I would actually be working at the Mothman Museum, getting paid to talk to people, answer their questions, and just have an absolute blast. And I also, one other thing, I was able to, Jeff always has me speak at the Mothman Festival as the last speaker on Sunday. And I want to thank Bill again for giving that great introduction that he did. When he was giving the introduction, I was looking around to see, who's he introducing? Who is this guy? So anyway, as all you know that we're here at the festival, it was just a really, really good time.
Yeah, it's a shame I couldn't attend the festival this year, but next
I would
year,
I would love to get Susy Bastille down there to talk about her research sometime.
Yeah.
And I put a couple bugs in Jeff's ears, so we'll
Yeah.
all
There's
have to
about
work on it.
29,000 too many people down there for me.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a lot of people,
just deal with it. You'll enjoy it.
right? So, and last but not least, we have Richard Hatem, not Hatem. I don't want people to get his last name wrong because I said Hatem, but that was just like a little joke I added in there. But we all love him, Rich. For those who don't know who you are, and if they don't, I'm gonna take them aside and beat them up in the parking lot. But no, I'm not gonna do that. Rich, go ahead. A little bit about yourself and how you got involved in writing the Mothman.
Well, keying off of everyone else, my introduction to John Keel was on March 14th, 1997, when I found a copy of the Mothman Prophecies at the Bodhi Tree bookstore on Melrose in Los Angeles. And I'm sure I'd come across the name before, but that's the first time it really sort of settled in my central vision. And I bought the book, and over the next 2 weeks, read it, and something clicked and connected. And I really had this overwhelming feeling that there was a story here that I could tell in the form of a feature film. I know I couldn't do it all, but there was a lot in there in terms of what it is like to really go down the rabbit hole, as you guys said, of the supernatural and what that does to a person and what the risks are. And that began my journey. For me, I grew up in Los Angeles in Monterey Park. I've lived here my whole life. I've never lived anywhere else. And I've written film, I've written television. I wrote for Supernatural, Grimm, Titans, many other shows, Witches of East End. And I was, it was a long journey to get to the Mothman Festival, but I'm glad I finally made it, and I hope I get invited back.
Right. Yeah, and I happen to have the privilege of meeting Rich in person last weekend, and I just really loved your presentation you did there. Your storytelling is just like phenomenal,
Well,
and I totally respect your journey that you had like full circle of what you were telling us there. From start to finish of where you are now.
well,
Very
that's the.
respectable.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say that's the fun part is that I met many of you
Hmm.
2 Saturdays ago at the Mothman Festival, and then one Saturday ago I met Matthew in Center Reach, Long Island, at the home of Janice and Leo Bartoldis when I was doing a performance of an episode of Richard Hatem's Paranormal Bookshelf, which is my current project, which is the podcast I've been doing for the last year and a half, and that's far and away the main thing I'm working on now. But it's so funny that's where you and I met, going through the haunted house and having a
Yeah.
few drinks and doing a show.
Yeah, exactly. And a big shout out to the people who run that. I really they did such a great job. Haunted Hallways is the name of their attraction. Haunted Hallways in Center East, New York. They are not doing it this year, but I believe next year, and they usually do something every year. But if you are in our area of Long Island and you are looking for a haunted attraction, to haunted house to walk through and whatnot. They do a phenomenal job. The artists that are just insanely talented there, and I really appreciate the job they did there. So a big shout out to them.
Yeah, I think we got the one and only show this year.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a very intimate show, and I'm glad that we got to experience it because if you were there with a ton of people, you may have not gotten that kind of pleasure or experience from doing a more intimate kind of thing there. So again, they just did a tremendous job there. So hats off to the owner and people who run it. So. All right, so guys, here we are, Mothman Roundtable. My very first question on my list, because I have a ton of them that I put together for this show. I'll start at the top with Bill. This is a question for everybody. Everybody can have time to add their input. But what I'd like to know from a paranormal researcher perspective is, do you guys feel this is something, a physical phenomena? Do you think it's a spiritual phenomena? or something completely unexplainable to this point because of all the credible eyewitnesses and reports? Do you feel it's physical? Do you feel it's spiritual? What's your thoughts on that? We'll start with Bill.
Well, thanks again, Matthew. My initial thought, and I know Steve is going to probably come at me for using his term here, but the transmogrification of energy. John Keel talked about that really ad nauseum, and Jackie kind of alluded to it when she was talking as well, too. It really depends upon who's looking at it. John Keel really told us in his writings that the phenomena presents itself along the belief systems of the person who's perceiving that phenomena. So that being said, half of the Mothman Prophecies book that was edited out originally, which turned into the Eighth Power, in that volume, John Keel goes into talking about frequencies, and he talks about basically how his theory of the super spectrum kind of goes to market, so to speak, and meaning that, let's say I'm looking at something and I have a limited scope of vision, but my dogs and cats, they can see something a little bit differently than I do. I think it's along a continuum. I think that we have the opportunity to perhaps see some of these things, Mothman, what have you, based upon where we're at and what frequency we're tuned into at that point. So I think it's energetic. I think it's spiritual in nature. I don't truly believe that it is 100% a physical thing, although I think it does have the ability to manifest physically as well.
Okay. Susy, what's your thoughts on that question?
I think all of those things can be true at the same time. Maybe not physical like you and I are, but even humans in our primitive monkey brains, we've figured out remote viewing. It could be something more advanced and sophisticated than that. Or it could be something completely unrelated to that. But, even just us as humans, we can do amazing things. So there's got to be other things out there in the world and beyond that can do even more amazing things than we can.
Yes.
And Bill kind of brought up an interesting point, and now I have a reason to talk about pukwudgies. With the transmogrification of energy and the different frequencies, you mentioned, your dog might see something or hear something before you do. That is a common denominator in pukwudgie sightings. The dogs always see them first, and then the humans see them afterwards. So that's one of the parallels that I've drawn between Mothman and pukwudgies.
Yeah, no, very, very similarities there, definitely. Jackie, go ahead. Your thought on that?
I'm kind of, it's a tough question. It's a tough question. For me,
I got to put the tough ones out there first.
Originally, I thought for sure Mothman was a project that was coming out of the Air Force Base that's right there. I can't think of the name of it, in Ohio. But I thought it was like, a man in a flying suit, something like that. And that was years and years ago I had this thought. And as I did more and more investigating and read more of Keel work and then my own experience with paranormal stuff, because I'm a paranormal experiencer, and standing in one spot and my husband right there beside me and me seeing something and him not being able to see it totally blew my mind away. And I'm like angry at him because he can't see what I'm seeing, and he got fed up with me and went in the house, and I'm like, what? So definitely I believe it's energy. I believe that, it's like what I said earlier, it depends who's looking. Where are we spiritually? Where are we, open-minded? Are we able to do remote viewing? If we can do remote viewing, maybe we can see other things. I can do remote viewing. I see things. So I think there's like this huge thing, and I can go around in circles all of this. I remember sitting beside Steve at the Mothman Museum one time when we were there visiting, we were just chatting. And I did this with him, and he's just sitting there nodding his head as I'm saying. And I said, maybe it's just a transmogrification of energy, but I kind of don't believe that there is a true physical aspect to it. And I don't know why why I don't believe that, except for when we were doing our interviews for our book. We were told by Denny Bellamy, who is the Mason County Visitor Bureau director, and he
Mhm.
said that on the first day of hunting season in West Virginia, 250,000 men, women, and children hit the woods. They all know what is, an animal. They all know how to shoot. And if there was something physical out there, they would have got it. So, but then there's also, talking to Joey Medea. He just did a new book, and him and Tanya had this missing experience thing, and they literally felt that they had slipped into another realm. So, maybe it's physical in another realm. I don't know. That's my
Yeah.
answer. I don't know. I don't know.
That's
Maybe
fun.
all of it. Like Susy
Yeah.
said, it's all of it.
I like that. As a paranormal researcher myself and an investigator, I use that answer a lot. So I totally agree with you there. So, yeah. Steve and I talked about that a little bit in our interview. That maybe it's a combination of a bunch of different things. But Steve, what's your thought on that question?
When people ask me that question, I go through the different experiences people have had with whatever this thing was, and it didn't behave physically, even when it looked physical. It didn't always flap its wings. People would have an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena after they saw it. Many people did. Some people saw it literally manifest and dissipate in their bedroom. Incredible people. Some people had missing time. Some people saw it in conjunction with a strange light in the sky. And so one time, and so instead of going through all that one time, somebody asked me that on a show, and I blurted out, Mothman is an elemental. And then I said, don't ask me what an elemental is, because I don't know. But it does suggest something paraphysical. Keel thought he saw footprints by the old North Power Plant that he associated with Mothman. It did seem to have a certain physicality at some point. And like Bill gave me credit for transmogrification of energy. Of course, I stole that from Keel, one of my favorite words. The only other place I've ever seen that is in Kelvin and Hobbes comic strips. Remember his transmogrifier, the big cardboard box? So Keel and Kelvin have something in common. So it presents a paradox. Many credible people having these experiences, and something really did happen, but it's certainly not a sandhill crane. It's not simply a true cryptid, some unknown animal, and it's something that fits many other paranormal experiences, many other so-called cryptids and so forth. So
Right.
we've just it's just I hate to use tip of the iceberg. It's got to be a better expression, but it's just a little pinpoint of what's going on.
Yeah. So, and you, Rich, what's your thought on that question? The physical, spiritual combination of the two. What's your thought?
Well, I feel that so much of this stuff is in the realm of sometimes physical, sometimes not. And it's strange when it comes to Mothman, when put up against all the other things that people see, Bigfoot, UFOs, gray aliens, that kind of thing, Mothman is really rare. Like, I'm not hearing about it a lot, at least not nearly as much as so many other things. And so at the beginning, when I read the book, Mothman itself was sort of secondary interest to me. It was the whole story of everyone in the town and all the various things that everyone was going through, and then things focusing in on the investigator, John Keel. So I didn't really think about it much, and people, because I wrote the movie, would always ask me, do you believe in Mothman? And I had a hard time answering that because I didn't have a lot to point to. But I will say this. 2 weeks ago, when I was in Point Pleasant for the first time, and I was able to go through the museum because Jeff was so kind to sort of let my wife Susan and I sneak in before it opened and just take a quick look, because there was a line of 200 people. And seeing the notebook paper with the actual writing of the witnesses that were created within 24 hours of when they saw it 60 years ago, that had a huge impact on me. And it really sort of made things snap into focus, like, oh, right. I mean, after all the conversations and podcasts and writing the script and all the experiences, something did happen that started all of this. And when you see faded, ink on a piece of paper from someone's home under a piece of glass, it really does. And of course, I also met Linda Sigmund, who was there and who was also a witness of a UFO and a Mothman at the exact same time. And I got to meet her and talk with her, and it suddenly made the whole phenomenon real in a way for me that it had never, ever been for 28 years. And I don't know, some, like I said, something snapped into focus, and I thought people did see something. And I don't think it was a misidentification. And early on, before the stories got around, people were making independent accounts of what they saw. And that really brought it home for me, and that had a big impact.
My next question, this could go for anybody, is Mothman hasn't just been seen in Ohio, West Virginia, Point Pleasant. There's some sightings in Chicago area, Illinois. There's been apparently sightings globally. Even here on Long Island many years ago, there's a place called Mount Misery. Steve and I talked about that a little bit. That there's been a witness or something connected with the Mothman and Long Island. So, like, to me, I kind of, I think it's like physical and spiritual, because it's like you have all these like places that he's visited, like not just one specific location. Um, where have been the most sightings? We'll start from we'll go in reverse. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. Rich, what sightings have there been, like, as far as where has it been the most, like, uh, centrally located?
I don't know. That's what's so strange, is that Bigfoot is associated with the Pacific Northwest, but then
Right.
Bigfoot-like creatures have been seen throughout America and throughout the world. I don't know that Mothman outside of Point Pleasant is necessarily connected to any one region. I know a lot of reports have come out of Chicago over the last 10 years. I know some of them have been questioned, and yet some, it seems to hover like the sightings seem to all be near O'Hare Airport. So I don't know literally in terms of what you're going to find on the internet, it's Point Pleasant and it's Chicago in the last 10 or so years. Beyond that, I'm not sure. And it's weird, when I wrote the screenplay and I included a little coda that said, Mothman has been seen in these other places. And I just made that up. I don't know that he had been seen in those places. I wanted something to suggest that this is an ongoing kind of phenomenon, because also I ran with the notion that, in a way, in the movie, to see the Mothman is to see a specter of your own impending death. And that was important for the story. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That makes it scary. And so I'm going to put that in.
Yeah.
But whether people saw it at Chernobyl, before the accident there, I honestly don't know. And I don't know if people are reverse engineering some of their experiences based on a later notion of what a sighting of Mothman might mean.
Right.
So I honestly don't know on Earth what region or what even kind of atmosphere is associated with Mothman.
Sure. Yeah. And Steve, we'll go with you next. We talked about that a little bit. I know that some of the reports coming out of the Chicago area, like, some of them are not so legit. We're not sure how credible those reports are. But being that, there are reports from Long Island many years ago Do you know of any other reports across globally other than Chicago and Virginia area or Illinois or wherever else?
Well, in his heyday in the 60s, it was through the Ohio Valley, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and so forth. A lot of people saw essentially the same thing. Not everybody saw the same thing. Keel talked to a little over 100 people that year, 66 to 67. Some people just saw a big ugly bird. Tom Urey saw kind of a well-formed thunderbird. So, like in many paranormal areas, things aren't quite the same. A lot of people have wanted to label other winged creatures the Mothman. But whatever these things are, they weren't. There was the Houston Batman in the 1950s. Some people said it looked like some guy in a flying suit, for crying out loud. There was the Wisconsin Man Bat, I think, in the early 2000s, Wisconsin. Linda Godfrey investigated that, a big, large, ugly bat-like thing that a father and son saw when they were driving, and they got ill afterwards. There were so many things that now, when I say that they were not the Mothman, if Keel was onto something about these things being transmogrifications, and we get into Carl Jung and the collective unconscious and paranormal mimicry and so forth, perhaps some of these things are coming from the same source and manifesting in different ways. I mean, we see them differently because they actually manifest differently. So I also a point well taken that, after a disaster, sometimes you'll hear people say, well, they saw a Mothman-like creature ahead of time. We have to be very careful with that. And there's a great researcher named Alison Jornlin that looked into the Chicago sightings, and she discovered some problems with several of them. So I'm always very cautious about that area. So I guess. I guess that's about all I have to say about that. We just have to be maybe I'm a little proprietary over our Mothman. Listen, you're not seeing Mothman anywhere. We got him right here in the Ohio Valley. But
Right.
in all seriousness, these things, if we're looking at the paranormal realm, if we're looking at paranormal mimicry, the monsters from the id, so to speak, anything's possible. If these energies really exist and these things manifest somehow, it might be exactly the same intelligence or the same principle. Keel thought these things were a natural condition of the planet. Perhaps it is all the same thing, just appearing differently.
Right. Exactly. Good point. Jackie, go ahead. What's your thoughts on what I said about the different reports and different sightings, and not just West Virginia, not just Ohio, but there seems to be a little bit of other sightings around the world.
Well, only based on a few documentaries on television did I know that they were, in other countries around the world. There was some reporting on documentaries. I don't know how true any of that is. I do know that I also did some work with investigating with the Chicago Mothman. And one of the presentations that we did as investigators was to a MUFON group for Missouri. And they were extremely interested in it, the Chicago Mothman, because they were having people come forward with their sightings of what they called Mothman there as well. And when Margie Kay is the person, she is, I don't know if she runs the MUFON group. Bill knows better about Margie, but she has Unex Network. She said that she had people on that were from the Texas area that had been having sightings of Mothman in Texas. So, they have Chupacabra there. So, I mean, maybe people are seeing Chupacabra, in one aspect, but this person over here might be seeing a Mothman. So, and then also, the Chicago stuff, I have to say something. Sorry, Bill. He doesn't like me talking about it because I'm pretty down on that whole thing too. Because doing some of the investigation on some of that stuff, there was never anything ever proven that anybody ever, but then, in Point Pleasant, really, how much proof was there either other than witness statements? But so I have a hard time believing that Chicago Mothman had as many sightings as what they're claiming. I truly believe that there were some witnesses that really saw something. There's a lot of large birds and stuff that we didn't used to have. And there's a lot of eagles now in this area that were never in this area. So I think that, some people are seeing some things. And I think some other of the reporting is, I think it's fake. I'll flat out say it. I think it's fake. I think that somebody is, trying to control a narrative, and they're reporting stuff, and then other people have jumped onto that bandwagon. And I have my reasons for all of that. But you said as many sightings as in Point Pleasant. I don't believe there's ever been as many sightings as there were in Point Pleasant.
Right.
Because we were sitting down for lunch with Jeff one day, and Sam Morano, who was the lead investigator in the Chicago Mothman cases, asked us to ask Jeff if he knew exactly how many Mothman sightings were reported. And Jeff said there were at least 100 reports to the police department. So he assumes, because it was the Bible Belt and it was in the 60s, there had to have been at least double that of the people that wouldn't even come forward to talk about what they had seen.
Yeah,
that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah,
Matthew, may I add something real quickly? I have a couple of good sources from the Mutual UFO Network that told me some time ago that some of the original sightings coming in about the Chicago Mothman were pretending to be from different places, but they were coming from the same IP address. Yes. And that was in the beginning. So that kind of, again, we're not disparaging every report that comes out of this wide area, but people should proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I agree. Yeah. No, good point. Go ahead, Susy. What's your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so I think there's Mothman and then there's winged humanoids. I think what happened in Point Pleasant, I don't think anyone has ever come close to it. And Mothman is only he's really not the most interesting part of that. So when you say Mothman, I think of all the other phenomena that happened as well. And I've never heard of anything along those lines anywhere else, but you do have winged humanoid stories around the world. We've had them here in the Bridgewater Triangle. My favorite one, 1971, a police officer saw what he thought was a man walking down the road about 6 feet tall. And he got closer to him thinking he was maybe a hitchhiker or something. And this figure kind of sprouted wings and then went straight up. Wings not flapping, just sprouted the wings. So they were there, but then went straight up into the air. And this man, like I said, it was a police officer. He ruined his own reputation talking about that. So I honestly believe, he really saw something. It happened to be on the end of in an area called Bird Hill, which is interesting. But there's also a history of Thunderbird and other winged humanoid sightings in the area as well. And I know a couple people have brought up Chernobyl, but we also have the Owl Man I think it's Cornwall in the UK.
Cornwall.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have, some pretty famous ones. So, for every one that you hear about, how many do you not hear about?
Right. Yeah, no, good point. Good point. Bill, go ahead.
And I've got to be pretty biased or really careful here that my bias doesn't come out, because like Steve, I very much have a sense of proprietary involvement with the Point Pleasant Mothman. Guys, Jackie and I live 60 miles outside of Chicago. When we first started attending MUFON meetings with Sam Morano, and he told me he was the lead investigator on the Chicago Mothman flap, I got to tell you, I was stoked. I mean, Point Pleasant's 550 miles for us. Chicago's 60. We can be there in an hour. So we were super excited. and we very much wanted to be able to investigate things and maybe even have a sighting of our own, or certainly at least talk to some of the people that had allegedly had the experiences. But as we got closer to the situation and we learned, I think Steve, you alluded to the 2 reports coming from the same IP address, or maybe it was 3 that came from 2 IP addresses. I'm not sure exactly what it was. The deeper we dove into it, the more it seemed contrived. Now, I don't want to go out and say that I think there's absolutely nothing going on there, because Jackie and I have talked about this, and we've found some numerical correlations that are mind-blowing when it comes to looking at Point Pleasant and when it comes to looking at some of the cases in Chicago. We see the inverse numbers of 13 and 31 kind of interposed here and there with different sighting locations and such. And could these be things that people just dove into and said, hey, let's turn this around and make it Route 31 in Illinois, where it was, 13 in West Virginia, or whatever that might be? That's entirely possible. But we found too many statistical anomalies to just like poo-poo the whole thing away. So we do think that there's something a little strange going on in the Chicago area. I mean, we live in this state. We know there's weird stuff here, whether it's paranormal or whether it's the taxation that we have, what we face here in the state, or whatever it might be. But I have to be really careful. I want to keep an open mind, and I don't want to just like say that other researchers are making things up, because I don't know that that's entirely what's going on. But the big difference I've seen between Point Pleasant and Chicago is Point Pleasant in the conservative Bible Belt 1960s had close to 200 reports, people that came forward, not just that told their stories, but signed their names. And now here we are 50 years later, 60 years later, we're in the internet. Everybody knows what you had for dinner because we're taking pictures of it, posting it, and talking about everything that we do. But now these people don't want to talk about these sightings because they're afraid they're going to tarnish their reputations. It doesn't add up to me exactly. So I do think there are sightings that take place in different places. I still do have this proprietary sense when it comes to the Point Pleasant Mothman, but I do think that there are other sightings that are happening in different areas. I just don't buy the Chicago flap. I don't buy it.
Yeah. No, I totally understand where you guys are coming from, 100%. Now, I brought up earlier about the physical and spiritual elements of those things. I have a really good question, which is, I know Steve brought this up a little bit about the footprint. My question with the footprint would be, has there been like a physical evidence or a trace of physical evidence other than a footprint? Like, has it been like from reports of credible people, which you can't take away from them, because again, they won't put their reputation on the line for what they've seen, like the police officer that Susy mentioned, like, why would somebody like that put their reputation on the line? But has there been like somebody who's been physically maybe touched, or has there been like scratches? Has there been some kind of like leftover physical presence of the Mothman? So that, I guess that's where I'm going with that. So, because like as an investigator, that's kind of the stuff you look for, right? So has there been anything with the reports of that? We'll start with Bill and work our way down.
Matthew, can I pass on this one?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to pass on this one.
I want to defer to Steve. Who was the woman who kind of tussled with Mothman with the baby?
Oh, okay. That was Marcella Bennett.
Okay.
She, I don't know if we could call it, this thing rose up off the ground. This is out in the TNT area. They went to go visit some friends. They thought it was a big joke. They were going to tap on the windows to scare their friends, and they weren't there, just the children. So Marcella is carrying her infant child, and they're walking outside with her brother. Her brother's actually trying to get her to notice some kind of a strange light in the sky. She wasn't interested. This thing rose up from the ground, apparently the Mothman. She absolutely is stunned. She drops her infant child, which turned out to be okay. She collapsed, and she couldn't make her legs work at first. They finally got back in the house, and this thing was walking back and forth across the porch. But I can tell you there is one physical effect of the Mothman that I can think of, and that was from Connie Carpenter. And in fact, Connie Carpenter came forward shortly after Roger Scarberry did last year to give further interviews to Jeff Wamsley. This will be in his next book. So we're waiting for this next book with breathless anticipation. At least I am. And but she was about 19 years old. She was still in high school. She was driving by the Mason Conley golf course. The Mothman stuff had just broken. She saw this thing standing there, 6, 7 foot tall, wings. It took off straight like a helicopter, red eyes, flew over her car. And shortly thereafter, when John Keel came down from Long Island, they got several people together in the same house, several of the original witnesses that had just broke. And she had a case of conjunctivitis, eye burn. And this is usually associated with UFOs or strange lights in the sky. So that's when Keel wrote in the Mothman Prophecies, I knew she was telling the truth because she had this effect with her eyes. And that happened after she saw this thing. And that was not a coincidence. But beyond that, maybe somebody else can think of, other than missing time. People had, of course, you might associate it with something else, but there has been very little that I can think of in the way of physical effects.
Yeah. There are two scenes actually. I'm going to go with Rich on this one. There are two scenes in Mothman Prophecies where there was physical evidence where Gordon had his ear bleeding and blood was trickling down his ear, and then like Steve mentioned, missing time, where the character that Richard Gere played when he was traveling and he ended up where he was 3 hours from where he wasn't, and just the amount of time that he took to travel to point A to point B, he was like, how the heck did that happen? So what's your thoughts on the physical evidence aspect, leaving traces of something behind?
Well, I don't know about the physical traces of leaving something behind beyond the Klieg conjunctivitis that Steve mentioned. I will say that in the book Beyond the Pale Moonlight, the Linda Sigmund book that I got at the festival a couple of weeks ago and just read, in it is a story that's so interesting. I don't know. It's just nothing like anything I've ever heard before. She saw a UFO. This was in April of '67 when she was with her boyfriend, and they were parked sort of overlooking the river. And I'm sure by then there were already stories circulating in the area about strange lights coming up and down the river, and so that was at least one of the reasons this 16-year-old girl and her 17-year-old friend went up there. But anyway, they saw a UFO, they saw a Mothman, and then there was some missing time. Years later, she had hypnotic regression. And what was filled in is so strange. She remembers sitting on the hood of the car, looking up at the sky. She remembers being startled and falling off the hood of the car, then seeing something in front of her with two dark legs, looking up, seeing what we understand now to be Mothman, and then Mothman picking her up, walking around to the car. Her boyfriend has gotten into the car and is behind the wheel of the car. Mothman then sets her down, takes her boyfriend out of the car, picks her back up again, puts her in the car and pushes her into the passenger seat across the bench, then takes her boyfriend and replaces him back behind the wheel. What an odd narrative. And then the door is closed, and then normal time resumes again. And the next thing she remembers is she and her boyfriend driving down the road and looking up. The UFO is now over their car, and she can see the Mothman creature in the sky near the UFO, tracking it. So there is, if nothing else, physical contact with Mothman. Never heard a story like this before in my life. I'm curious if anyone else has.
Yeah, no, anybody, feel free. Whoever wants to go.
Okay.
The only thing the only thing that I can think of, and maybe this is just something that I don't know. I mean, it may not be correct. But for some reason, this is something that Bill and I have talked about. When Linda and Roger Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette were heading back into Point Pleasant on Route 62 after seeing Mothman, Mothman was flying over their car. And they talked about Mothman swooping down over their car. And at one point, Mothman hit their car with its feet or hands or whatever and scratched the vehicle. Because I don't know if it's in the reports or where we saw this information, because they said that Roger, maybe Denny told us this, that Roger was a tough 18-year-old guy and he loved that car. And he said that if anybody would have touched that car, he would have beat the shit out of him. And he was so afraid that he didn't care, about the scratches on his car. He was just happy to be alive and able to report it.
What I'd heard, I don't know if it's the same source, but that the wings came down and slapped the side of the car. And supposedly when they got out, Roger, that's the first thing he checked to see if there was any dents in the side of his car. And one other quick aside, he came forward last summer. Jeff Wamsley had been trying to get to talk to him, after 50, 60 years after that original report that Richard alluded to, with the handwritten report. And he finally came to Jeff and said, Jeff, I'm tired of hearing people talking about my experience and getting it wrong. So he gave Jeff a long form interview. I was fortunate to be on part of that. I can't reveal it because, as I've said before, it's under double secret probation. And I don't want to be, exiled from the Mothman Museum for talking about it. But one thing I can say is that the day before, when he set up the interview with Jeff wondered, after all this time, did it really happen? Was it exaggerated or whatever? So he said, Roger, just tell me, did it really happen? And Roger Scarberry said to him, Jeff, it scared the hell out of us. Oh, one other thing. My neighbor I was just talking to next door, he talked to a gentleman, a friend of his, somebody I know, when the first stop they made was Tiny's restaurant before they went to the police station. Linda Scarberry worked there. And they went and talked to her boss. Her boss suggested they go to the police. But this man I'm talking about said when they drove up there, he said they were genuinely frightened. They weren't making this up. So there's another corroboration that something truly bizarre happened.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You're crazy. What is your if you guys had a choice or how do I put this? How do I explain? All right, so I'm a fan of the TV show Skinwalker Ranch. So of course the guys at Skinwalker Ranch they're all praying that they find a UFO. So what's your kind of hope for the Mothman? Like is there anything that you think what you want it to be? Is there anything that you'd hoped it to be? I know a lot of the credible reports and the eyewitnesses that this thing shows up, randomly. It chooses people randomly. Again, I want to be careful with the tragedies and the events that took place, but you can't help but think that there's one theory out there about it being a prophet. Maybe he shows up when things take place, or is he like a vision of something that's going to happen? What's your thoughts on that? We'll start with Susy and work our way around.
So my hope is that the people that make Skinwalker Ranch never get their hands on Mothman, because they came up here and they said Pukwudgies were little skinwalkers, which I did not appreciate.
Oh.
So my hope is that they don't get involved in that show.
Okay.
But my personal feelings on it, I do think it's, part of nature. All, any kind of creature, either physical or non-physical, would be. But I think that we just can't know. We're not even good at predicting other people's motives, and we're not good at understanding what our cat is thinking. We project our own feelings onto people, animals, everything. We have no shot in ever figuring it out, and it doesn't seem to want to be figured out. So I'm just happy to kind of keep observing and learning, and I've already mourned the fact that I'll never know.
Yeah, I like that point of view. That was good.
Remember what Dr. Leake said in Richard Hatem's script when Richard Gere said, "Didn't you need to know?" And Dr. Leake said, he said, "We're not allowed to know." One of the best lines in the entire film, I might say.
I want to call out Louis Clark and Ernest Marrero, who are part of Mark Pellington's creative brain trust. Some of everyone's favorite lines in the movie were not written by me. I want credit where credit is due, and that's one of them. Although what's so wonderful about the work that Mark did on the movie and subsequent writers was maintaining a sense of the theme of the movie, which is exactly that it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole, and it's not as easy to come back out of the rabbit hole sometimes. And going all the way down that rabbit hole might not be the healthiest thing for human beings. And one of the big themes, obviously, in the movie that I wrote was the idea that you can only spend so much time gazing into the darkness. And sometimes that darkness is simply grief over a past relationship. And that you have to then at a certain point, you have to let some light in. And that's, of course, what Laura Linney's character was all about in terms of Richard Gere's character. And my favorite line is when she says, "It's okay to mourn your wife, but you can do that here with people who care about you. You don't have to do that alone in a house waiting for a phone call from a ghost." And I think that's the message for humanity in a way. In terms of, what we will know one day, I'm not sure. The people who experience this stuff, Whitley Strieber, I mean, he's been living with it for decades. And he says in the introduction to the most recent reprint of Communion, he's like, "Look, I've been dealing with this and trying to figure it out in various ways and approaching the mystery from various angles. But it is, it's really hard for human beings to understand and get a handle on or feel control over a thing that can blink in and out of our reality." And he's referring in his case to the visitors, but my God, I mean, there's a person trying to live with that reality, and it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask Richard one other question about some dialogue where the scene where Richard Gere is just getting to know Laura Linney's character, and he's assuming that she's kind of a country bumpkin growing up on a farm or whatever, and she kind of chastised him for it. Is that you, or do we?
Totally. I could talk to you all day about the relationship between those two characters, but that was my favorite thing. That was my favorite.
Let me tell you something.
She's like, "Oh yeah, we wear shoes, from book learning and
church and schooling."
Some of the West Virginians I know love that back and forth. Because, and the one guy that told me about it, he said, "Look, we aren't a bunch of country bumpkins here," and it's true.
Well, that was what was so important to me was to have those characters, especially in terms of her, that sort of say the thing that Keel said in the book. These are people. They don't live in New York, they don't live in Washington D.C. or Boston, but these are good, sort of uncomplicated people who aren't necessarily going to fall prey to flights of fancy.
Right.
And he's like, and that's what I'm getting from them. These are very clear-minded people. Which is, to their personal detriment or not, they're coming forward saying, "Hey, here's what I saw."
Well, it's a great scene and well acted by both of them.
Isn't it? I love it so much.
I kind of feel like Laura Linney's character and Richard Gere, their characters had to portray, uh, before having experiences later in the movie, is they had to kind of go into it like as skeptics, like especially the police officer aspect of her duty, right? So like her whole town is experiencing all these weird things. So she's kind of like she's the rational side of trying to piece it all together and trying to make everybody feel more sane that they're not crazy. But again, like then she has experiences herself later on. So it's like
Well,
I
yeah,
like
and it's not
myself.
what's cool about that relationship, and retroactively people have called it out, is that you expect the two stars of the movie, they're gonna kiss, they're gonna wake up in bed together at some point. That never happens in this movie. They clearly have a relationship, a personal connection, but if it becomes romantic or physical, that's post movie. And it really isn't until the final moment of the movie that Laura Linney's character, Connie, I think, steps over the line and realizes, oh, there may be a level of reality to these supernatural events, because wake up number 37 is the dream that I had, and this has been that. And sort of comes over almost to like, looks at him like, oh, maybe there's you've been right all along, but oh,
Right.
there is something to all this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I do like that. I there were reasons that I wrote the relationship that way, but now, especially 20 years on, there's not a lot of movies about people who between people who you think there's going to be an overtly romantic relationship within the span of the film, that have a deeply emotional relationship that isn't that one.
Right.
And I really love how they played it, and I
Yes.
think you feel it, and I think when the movie ends, you're kind of like, well, I do hope they get together in the future.
I think, Rich, that you mentioned that we talked about that at the festival. And I think, speaking to the greater theme of unprocessed trauma, Richard Gere, John Klein, is going through, he's still processing through the loss of his wife. And then through
Yeah.
these paranormal manifestations, maybe his wife is still around. Maybe he can still connect with her, right? So
Sure.
Connie is hanging in the balance, and she's being the voice of reason, the voice of law enforcement, but also support. But because they don't, quote unquote, go there, it maintains the purity of that relationship, giving him the space to be able to process through that trauma to effectively close that chapter of his life at the end of the movie. And then maybe they can move on and roll forward in a relationship after that a lot cleaner. So I don't know if that was your intention, but I'm kind of picking up that it might have been.
Yeah, and again, I love that she doesn't, because she doesn't she's not Scully. She doesn't say, look, I believe that there is a logical explanation for everything people are saying. They're seeing a bird, they're seeing that. She never goes there. She maintains this sort of, here's what these people are reporting. They're upset. They're members of my community and my friends, and I'm concerned about them. And it's sort of, I mean, in a way, it's that beautiful middle ground Fortean approach to supernatural phenomena, which is, well, I'm not saying I believe it. I'm not slamming the door and denouncing it. I'm concerned, and I love it because it reminds me of what you and Jackie do. It's like, I'm more concerned with the emotional blowback, and I'm concerned that you're becoming too wrapped up in this, and I don't want to see you go the way of Gordon Smallwood.
Yeah.
Because that guy's dead now.
Mm-hmm.
He followed it all the way. And now suddenly you're acting the same way. And I'm worried about you. Right. I'm not worried that you have the wrong philosophy. I'm worried that something bad has happened to you emotionally that you're not going to be able to pull out of. And so I'm going to constantly leave the door open and let you know I'm here. People who care about you are still here. And whenever you want to sort of look away from the darkness and look back into the light, we will be here for you. And I think in any situation, that's what everyone needs to hear.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. Bill, I'm glad you brought that up, that term, trauma, because that's actually was going to help my segue into your book, Bridging the Tragedy, because there was a lot of people that unfortunately died during that tragedy, the bridge collapse, Silver Bridge, 1967. There was a lot of theories, possibly the chemical plant. There was, the other talks of just the bridge being, not intact, it didn't pass, the right inspection, or, it was old, falling apart, whatever the case may be. But these people experience a traumatic event that, um, had a big effect on the rest of their lives. Because now, if I was in their shoes, I'd be like, I'm never crossing the bridge ever again. No. But to that point, they're having this traumatic event, and so I'll bring you guys up to that. Like, are they still having like a hard time getting beyond that traumatic event? Are they, coping with it okay? Are they, where's their, are they okay with it now? Or that's my question.
Sure.
My
Yeah,
perspective, actually, from reading Bill and Jackie's book, I'm going to give you guys my perspective as a reader.
There you go.
They have pushed that trauma down and hit it pretty deep down.
Yeah.
So, I think times are different. It's a different area
Mm-hmm.
than I am in. They were raised differently than me. Some of the things people said in interviews, it was so heartbreaking, because it's like they don't think that, they're allowed to feel certain feelings about things. I very much got, it was like pushed down and repressed. But being from a small town myself, my hometown population, about 6,000, so not too much bigger. If you had that many people die at the same time, regardless of anything else happening, there is no way that entire town was not impacted. Like, everyone there, that was their cousin, someone they went to school with. There's no way they couldn't still have an impact and lasting trauma from that. There's no way.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
thank you, Susie.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we had the opportunity to interview 11 people for Bridging the Tragedy. 2 of them were really more paranormal witnesses, but the other 9, the bridge disaster was very central to their lives. In fact, the very first person who called me when we placed the ad in the Point Pleasant Register was a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Wedge. And Jimmy gets me on the phone and he says, "Hey, my name is Jimmy Wedge, and I saw your ad in the paper," real thick Southern accent. Then he says, "I lost both my mom and dad on the bridge." And immediately I'm like taking a step back thinking, oh my goodness. I felt like the level of responsibility in this phone call for me was really high. And so Jackie and I talked, about our interview that we were going to do with Jimmy, a couple of months down the road. And we kind of went back and forth, and we joked. It wasn't really a joke. We were a little nervous because we come to find out that Jimmy is he's a congressman and a lobbyist, and he's really kind of a legend in the area we'd never heard of, and he just didn't give interviews. So we were a little nervous. Is the psychologist going to interview this guy, or is the retired postmaster going to do this? How are we going to handle this? And finally, I just decided to interview him. And when we sat down in the hotel room, he was the funniest guy of the group. He was hilarious. Now, he talked about lobbying and campaigning and all these things you did back in the day, going around giving people a fifth of whiskey and a $5 bill, basically to buy their votes. I mean, he was funny as all get out, but the very real side of what he faced by losing mom and dad at 25 years old was just absolutely heartbreaking. And he told us, he said, even when I go to funerals today, he says, I'm 79 years old. I break down like that. He said, it just happens immediately. There's nothing I can do about it. It just is what it is. And we talked to Linda Lane, who lost her sister-in-law in the bridge disaster also. And she talked about how her brother would walk up and down the banks of the river until they finally pulled the car up. He would not eat, he would not sleep, he would not rest until they finally pulled that car up, and then he basically collapsed. But we had so many really powerful stories. But like Susy was talking about, the big theme of we didn't have psychiatrists, we didn't have therapists, we didn't know who to talk to. I mean, there were ministers, there was the community, there were all kinds of, good ways to be able to get help, but it's not in the traditional sense that we're used to, in 2025. It was totally different than that. So to your point, Susy, yes, I think in some ways they pushed that trauma down, and in some ways it's still alive. But thankfully, I think that a good chunk of the community has processed it. There are still some who have not.
Nice. Steve has.
Well, the community itself had to go through an entire process, because the town of Point Pleasant was a thriving little town. And we were told that whatever Point Pleasant had, Gallipolis didn't have. And Gallipolis had things Point Pleasant didn't. And they were like sister cities. And they just traveled across, both the people from Ohio and West Virginia traveled back and forth quite often to, shop in each other's communities. And when that bridge went down, they were cut off from each other, completely cut off from each other. And then when they did finally 2 years later get that bridge rebuilt, it's like 1.5 miles down the river from where it was. This is no longer going right through Point Pleasant. Point Pleasant lost everything. I mean, they lost everything. They had to rebuild. And if, honest to God, if it wasn't for the Mothman Prophecy movie and Jeff Wamsley finding all of those clippings from, his dad saving everything from the newspapers and starting a museum, and John Keel, writing, doing all the reporting he did, Point Pleasant would still be a dead, sleepy little town, like a lot of them across America. And the community had to band together and they had to rebuild. So, I mean, that in itself was just huge in itself. It's the sense of community that they had to have. And they've had to have it not just for a very short time. They had to have it over, a Christmas season, and then all, into the other holidays as it went on and on and on, the search for these bodies. And we were told by, Susan Sayer, I believe, when she just broke down and cried, and she couldn't believe how emotional. Several people broke down and cried, but she said she can still remember the day that they took Kathy Bias's body or desk out of the classroom. And Kathy Bias was, a 10-year-old little girl whose body was never found, and for a person to talk about that and still be sobbing, is definitely trauma that's not been processed. They didn't have psychologists. They didn't have school counselors. They didn't believe in a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, good point. Steve, does any of the people have experienced the bridge collapse? Have they come to the museum, to share their stories with you guys? Have they come to the museum just to share their thoughts or just visit in general? Have any of them come to you guys?
Well, I sit down on the bench and take my smoke break without a smoke several times while I'm on duty, and you get all kinds of stories. This one old timer came by, and I always smile when I call other people old timers, but he said, "Yeah, I was here, and it was in town, and I actually saw the bridge fall." I mean, you get stories like that. In 2017, at the 50-year remembrance ceremony, they always have a ceremony where they read the names in downtown Point Pleasant, and it's right by the memorial. If you go 2 blocks north of the Mothman Museum, you'll find a mural of the bridge on the flood wall. You'll find a memorial and the 46 names of the people that died are embedded on the sidewalk. And so that's important there. But in 2017, it was the next day actually, a friend of mine and I walked down to the River Museum, which is another great museum. And there was a gentleman there with his family named Bill Edmondson. He was 88 years old, which means he was 38 when he was crossing the bridge that night. He was in his semi. The bridge went down like a series of dominoes. In the film, Richard Gere has some time to try to warn people. Of course, the tragedy was it only took 30 to 40 seconds for the bridge to fall. He went down in his truck, He was forced through the passenger window, right arm first. He couldn't use his right arm. Later, he had a pin put in. He came to the surface. A tugboat captain saw him and pulled him, cut him off downriver and pulled him up. This is December 15th, 1967. The sun's almost down. It's 20 degrees. The bridge is filled with rush hour traffic and Christmas traffic. So, that was quite a story.
Yeah.
But
No.
may I break script here for just a second? I've got a question
Yeah.
I'm dying to ask Bill. Bill,
Okay. Sure.
Richard gave the actual date and bookstore that he found the Mothman Prophecies movie. I remember vividly pulling the book off the rack when it first came out. You said that when you saw the film, it changed your life. Can you give us some sense of what I wonder what that was like for you?
Well, Steve, thanks for the question. For me, it was a turning point. Like I mentioned earlier on, I was always paranormal interested, but I was kind of a little bit away from the paranormal scene. And when I watched the movie, it just really captured my attention. Now, I watched the movie about a year before Jackie and I met. Shortly after we got together, I picked up the copy of the Mothman Prophecies book, the mass market one with the red cover on it. I bought that, and then I also downloaded the version that Craig Wasson does, the narration that he does too. And so I started getting into the both of those. But I would say the movie itself was like a turning point in my life where all of a sudden my interests were rekindled once again in the paranormal. But it was shortly after that when I started going off the deep end with John Keel's research, where I just totally changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I didn't expect, in my 50s to be an author writing about the Silver Bridge disaster. That wasn't a goal that I had. I didn't even expect really to be a psychologist when all this was taking off. But what I've found is that Keel talks a lot about the word synchronicity. And every time that I've taken a step in the direction of this research, the path continues to open up for us with Jackie and me as we continue to kind of go down this path together now for over 20 years. We have met so many fascinating, interesting people that have kept us captivated and really connected to the paranormal research community in a way that I just never really expected would ever have happened. So I guess, again, Rich, thanks for the movie. Thanks for putting the movie out there. Had that not happened, I likely wouldn't be here today and really have probably accomplished the things I've done the last 20 years with my life. It was a turning point for me, I guess. I'm not sure if I answered your question directly, Steve, but that's the best that I got.
Here is Bill and Jackie's book, which
There
I
you
was
go.
lucky enough to get at the festival, and they signed it for me. Yay!
Right.
So anyone looking for the book, get the book. It's awesome.
Yeah. That's
Thank
next
you.
on my list.
And when I'm in the museum and I ask people, have they seen the movie? Have you read the book and so forth? Of course, there are many documentaries out there these days due to Jeff Wamsley, Denny Bellamy, and so forth. But most people have been introduced to the Mothman from the film of 20 years ago. So
Yeah.
I always love it when somebody's actually read the book, and when somebody walks by the book stand, with all the books, I gravitate right there, and I'm very happy to guide them. But
Yeah.
yes, that film put Mothman on the map. I mean, the John Keel has been rediscovered, and a lot of his stuff has been reprinted. And he was being forgotten about for a while there. The only thing that stayed in print, I think, was the Mothman Prophecies, but that's
Yeah.
changed.
I remember when I discovered the book and when I got to speak to him, I really did specifically feel this weird feeling of having discovered a forgotten voice. And I was so excited because I'm like, everyone's heard of Bigfoot. Everyone's heard of UFOs. No, I don't think anyone's heard of Mothman. Like, this is not something that comes up. And so I can sort of be the one to be like, look at this thing I discovered. And I was so excited for it. And I was very happy that it did bring attention and some money to John Keel at a point in his life when, I think he needed and was happy to get both. So that was that was part of it for me. I was sort of like, how was this not talked about? How was no one, asking these questions and diving into this stuff. So it was fun to be part of that process of bringing it out for people. And one more quick thing, the Forrest Burgess and Scott Philbrook, who do the Astonishing Legends podcast, when they were talking about the movie and the book, they were saying, the movie's really cool, but it usually movies will sort of build on the book and add in a bunch of stuff that's not in the book. And this one does the opposite. So it's always fun when people see the movie and then read the book and they're like, what? This is way weirder.
Yeah. That was one of my questions to Steve when Steve was on my podcast. I had asked him what he thought of the movie versus the book, and I said how close was it to the actual book, and then I took me for a surprise. Steve was like, that book, like that movie was so accurate in so many different ways, and yeah, it's rare to have such a movie based on true events of that book. And because a lot of movies, like when they're filmed, are loosely, very loosely based on a lot.
Well, if I can jump in really quick, there's a couple of ways to look at that, and I'm so happy that if there was a feeling from John Keel that the movie captured what he felt and some of what he experienced, the growing fear and paranoia and sort of disorientation that he experienced in investigating this, then I'm thrilled, because I think that's such a central part of what I was trying to get to and what I think people experience when they go down the rabbit hole. And then on the other side, I've gone out of my, especially recently, I've gone out of my way to try to reiterate that sometimes people say, well, the most basic facts about the bridge collapse, you got wrong. You got the date wrong. You got the number of people wrong. And I have to go out of my way to say that was done intentionally. I would have put any number on the number of people who lost their lives on the bridge except for the real number, because besides updating the time frame and not having it take place in the 60s, but rather take place in the late 90s, early 2000s, I wanted to make it really, really clear I was not attempting to do a docudrama about the events that were experienced by real people. And this was not based on real people, because people did experience a tragedy and people lost their lives and people lost family members. And I wanted to make it really clear that this was not an attempt to tell an accurate retelling of the exact events, but rather use what happened there and the emotions of what happened there as a way to explore these other emotional issues. And that's part of why I think I had a little bit of ambivalence about taking the initiative to go to Point Pleasant. I'd never been there. Not during research, for the movie, which I didn't do research. I read the book because I felt like I don't know how people in the town square that. And do they feel that the movie was an unfair representation of what happened, or some sort of did it increase the trauma and did it make them feel worse? And I will say that personally, thank God no one has ever come to me with that feeling, because that's obviously not what I want. But I wasn't sure. And so I think there was a part of me that was a little bit hesitant to go to the actual scene of the crime, as it were. And I felt those feelings as I entered the city 2 weeks ago. I was nervous. I was upset in certain ways. And it wasn't until I started meeting people face to face and talking to them that I felt like, okay, this is okay. And what's great is that the town, and I had this conversation with somebody, the town has sort of taken what, the legend of Mothman bringing doom. And it's like, but in a weird way, Mothman's also brought a lot of good stuff to the community.
Yeah.
Because through the movie and through the museum and people's embracing of the idea of Mothman as sort of an outsider that they can identify with based on whatever is going on in their lives, that in a certain way, it's like the movie and all of the festival has led to good things happening in the town, and maybe a sort of a rebirth the hotel's going to come back, it sounds like, and the theater is getting redone. I mean, so hopefully over time, the ultimate the ultimate legacy of Mothman will be hopefully more positive than negative.
Well
May I add to
said.
that? May I add to that? Back to talk about what you were saying, Richard. Back when the film came out, John Keel came out after a long hiatus and gave an interview to Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM. And I thought, oh, it's great. I remember seeing him on television back in the 60s on some obscure New York show. But anyway, and Art Bell said, I confess, I don't know anything about the Mothman. And I thought, what? That's sacrilege, Art Bell. You don't know anything about the Mothman? To the woodshed, for crying out loud. And Keel, he asked him point blank, what did you think about the script? He said, I liked it. And he said, the thing it really captured was the paranoia that I felt at that time. And if you remember the chapter 16 of the book, paranoiacs are made, not born. And then I have to tell this story again. Richard's heard me tell it a couple times. You might be getting nauseous over this, but Brent Raines has written a great book called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. And in there, he's talking to Sandra Martin, who was John Keel's literary agent toward his last days. And she said she had a conversation with him. Apparently, people had been sending him scripts over the years. Well, they were just turning Mothman into a monster or something. But she said, John Keel, he was on the phone. He was laughing. He was so happy. He said, I got this script from this guy, Richard Hatem. And you know what? They've updated it. They've kind of told their own story, but they finally got some of the essential ideas of my book. And he was so happy. And Richard, I'm going off script again, but you've got to give us a little bit of the flavor of what it was like when John Keel came to visit you in California.
It was so weird. It was so weird. I talk about it a little in one of the episodes of my podcast, but he came out. I was living in Altadena, which is right above Pasadena. So I was way, way up in the foothills. It was actually the area that experienced the terrible fires earlier this year. The house that I was living in burned to the ground last January. And that's the house where I met John Keel. And he came out, he was staying on the west side, but I'm like, would you come to my house and have dinner? Because I wanted him to sign my books. And I had all these first editions, so I was excited. And we got him out to the house, and it was, at the time, I was with my ex-wife and my two of my three sons, who were very little. They were 5 and 3 at the time. And I just remember sitting in my living room and seeing my 5-year-old just like leaning against his knees, like just totally invading his physical space and going, Mr. Keel, I have a question. And John Keel's like, okay. And my son goes, who would win in a fight, a bear or a dog?
Steve, that's like what I did on the last episode we recorded, where I asked that guy if Mothman or Dogman would win in a fight. I'm like Richard's 5-year-old.
Yeah, and John Keel, like a guy who had experience with 5-year-olds, was like, well, he's like you'd think a bear, because a bear is stronger, but the thing about a dog is a dog will never stop fighting. It'll never stop to protect its master. And then Owen took that in, and then he said, what about a dog and a shark? and again, John Keel's answer was, depends on how good a swimmer the dog is. And it was such great John Keel, and I'm like, this is a guy who was never married. He didn't have kids. He doesn't have grandkids. What is it like for him to face a 5-year-old? This has got to be weirder than a Man in Black. And meanwhile, my 3-year-old is wearing his diaper, just his diaper, jumping up and down on a chair on the other side of the room going, John Keel, John Keel, John Keel, John Keel.
That's what I do at home.
We've all done it. And I'm just like, this is the most surreal thing that's happening to me. I can't even imagine how John Keel feels about it. But it was fun. It was. I'll tell you though, when I had read the book and I was so excited about meeting him, I was coming to him as if he were a guru, and I wanted him to explain the mysteries of life. Oh my goodness, there's a feline alien big cat right attacking Steve.
Hey, no attention to the cat behind you.
And I was like, I'm gonna have these deep philosophical conversations with him, and that is absolutely not what happened at all. He had no interest in going deep. He was like, it was all pretty weird, it was a long time ago, and if you wouldn't mind driving me to Ralph's, I need to get some, low sugar, low sodium Chef Boyardee microwavable meals. And oh my! Wait, the cat somehow got all the way into Susie's house.
Steve's cat jumped to Susie's cat.
It was a transmogrification.
There's all this transfer. Wait a second! Now it's in.
Oh, look at that!
That's great.
This is the greatest moment.
I'm glad I wasn't alone.
Wow.
The cat has found a wormhole to everyone's house. I'm waiting now for someone to show up here. Anyway, so it was, my interactions with John Keel were great, and the more the movie became real, and of course his joke was always that when they cast Richard Gere, he was absolutely stunned at the uncanny resemblance. And
yes.
I think as the process moved forward, he became more and more comfortable with the fact that it was happening. And I think, again, for him, I think the results were very positive. So
that's great. Yeah, no, awesome. There's a photograph. I brought this up in my interview with Steve. I want to get everyone else's thoughts on the photo that's been going around for quite a while. I believe it was Silver Bridge, or maybe not Silver Bridge, or some other bridge, that there is a supposed somewhat creature hanging out on top of the bridge. And I don't know if it's like photoshopped. I don't know. Usually when things are too good to be true, they usually are,
Yes.
But yeah, there's a well-known photograph floating around that's been out there for a little while that apparently has the Mothman hanging out on the top of the bridge. And I don't know. What's your guys' thoughts on that photograph? Do you think it's real, fake? We'll start with Bill at the top and work our way down.
Well, based upon the conversations we've had with the folks in Point Pleasant, we've gotten to know. One of the things that was told to us when we wanted to do our study in the first place was you can talk to people about the Silver Bridge, and you can talk to people about Mothman, but don't you dare put those two together. We were warned about that before we started doing our research. So I know I've seen a number of pictures over the years, artistic representations of things that I don't think are legit pictures. I've never seen one that I believed was an accurate representation of reality.
Yeah, for me, photographs and videos are never compelling. I've never seen one that made me change my belief. It's talking to people and like hearing the emotion in their voice when they're telling the story of what happened to them and things like that will really, it can, change your mind one way or the other. There, between AI, Photoshop, everything else that's out there, but even before that, it just doesn't do it for me. I will hear your eyewitness account over 10 million photographs any day.
I'm right there with Susy. I agree with her take on it too. I don't believe it. I mean, if there was something, it literally would have had to have been dated December 1967, and it would have had to have been verified not to have been any other type of bird or like double exposure. That's the only way I would even consider it fake.
I agree with everybody. In the event of CGI and AI, a photograph is only going to be as good as the story with it and the credibility of the person telling the story. Whenever I see anything like that, I completely reject it.
Do we know when this photograph surfaced?
I think it was in the 90s, I believe, or late 90s, or somewhere around that time period. But if I'm accurate, I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the photograph that's being referenced. Maybe I've seen it, maybe I haven't, but I feel the same way
Yeah.
as pretty much everyone else. Like when you know, um, there may have been photographic evidence of something in the past, but nowadays photographic evidence
Yeah.
means nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, because like as a paranormal investigator, I hate AI. I don't know about you guys, but like that's like totally working against us now.
Yeah, Susie makes a good point. I mean, really, all we have are the people. I don't really think we have much more than that, and that's where I think we should focus our investigatory energy. And to me, that's the most interesting part of any of this is how people are experiencing the things they experience.
Yeah.
And something this reminds me of happened to me yesterday. Everyone's always saying, how come everyone has a camera on their phone? Why haven't they gotten a picture of a Bigfoot yet? Yesterday, a chipmunk ate out of my hand, and my son could not get his phone out fast enough to take a video of it.
There you go.
We all know chipmunks exist. I don't have proof that happened, but
But you know what? We believe you because you're credible, Susie.
There you go.
on a good
Right.
day.
And there was a second witness.
There was, yes.
That's true.
But he was biased.
I do pay the allowance, so
That's
I don't.
right.
Yeah, money changed hands.
I'm biased.
The chipmunk or the other one?
Hey, before we move on here, Rich, I've got a question I have to ask you, and this is an observation that I made as a researcher post Mothman Prophecies movie. The name Gordon Smallwood. So I'm listening to an audio version of Flying Saucers and the Three Men by Gray Barker, and the name Gordon Smallwood pops up, and I think, what the hell? That's where you got that name from, isn't it? It's got to be.
Yeah, it was. They knew too much about flying saucers, I think. And it was. And it was Gray Barker going, let's say there's a person named Gordon Smallwood, and let's say this person does this and that, and I read that book within a few months. I read it right after reading the Mothman Prophecies, and I read it because I found it. I'm like, what is this? And it was another Illuminate reprint of a old title, and John Keel wrote the foreword. So I'm like, oh, another John Keel thing. Back when it was like, wow, I made a real find here. And so I did crib that, and I stole, and Connie Carpenter and, Connie in my movie, I was taking names and stuff and sort of putting in little, nuggets and Easter eggs and stuff for people just like you to find, and you found it. Yay.
Well, hey, and the casting of Will Patton as Gordon Smallwood was lights out. He was excellent.
Oh, yeah. Brilliantly played by him. Yeah.
Yeah. We got really, everyone in the cast was fantastic.
And I'll reiterate, Alan Bates and John Keel mentioned on Coast to Coast AM. He said he really liked Alan Bates. Of course, he's Dr. Leak, Keel spelled backwards, but he said he reminded me of me. Two old curmudgeons. So,
well, yeah, and of course you want, you want to be, have Richard Gere and Alan Bates portray the two, versions of you. I often say, my dream actually, and I think Alan Bates did a wonderful job, and I'm very, very happy with everyone's performance. But the dream when I wrote the script was that part would be played by somebody like Robert Duvall or even Harvey Keitel. I'm like, I really want someone. I don't want the old, I am the British professor. Yes, I know the secret. Hey, open up this dusty volume. I want it to be a guy who looks like he was driving your cab to LaGuardia. Just blue collar, street level. Look, this is what I got. Here's what I think, because I felt that would make him seem even more genuine and even more scarily believable. But as it turns out, you really do want the British guy.
Well, Boo Radley would have been great.
Yeah, well, there you go. Boo Radley. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I can't believe we're like at 8:45. So I want to leave plenty of room for everybody to throw out to our viewers and listeners any projects you guys have coming up, any events, you have a shout out, anything. You guys have the floor right now to promote anything you guys like to plug. We'll start with Bill, work on our way down. Bill, you have anything coming up, anything to share with our viewers and listeners?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jackie and I are working on our next book. It's going to be called Transcending the Darkness. And in that book, we're going to be investigating the relationships between trauma and paranormal activity. And the goal is not necessarily to say that one of them precedes the other one. We're just investigating the relationships because I've always felt that trauma was something that kind of opens us up to otherworldly possibilities. We've got some tremendous people we've interviewed for this book. The Reverend Michael Carter from Ancient Aliens is going to be in the book, as well as Gary Osborne, who is the author of the Rendlesham Enigma, of the Rendlesham Forest incident, and Monroe Nevels, who was also one of the folks who investigated the craft that Jim Peniston touched at the Rendlesham Forest incident as well, too, along with another 10 people. Honey, what am I missing here?
As far as who we interviewed?
Whatever else you'd like to add.
Any events, anything coming up?
Well, we do have an event coming up in November, I believe, but Bill has the information on that. I don't even know what that is. I can plug our website, our Facebook page.
Sure.
Our website is prpconnect.org. Also, if you're interested in even being interviewed, if you've had any paranormal type of activity in your life, if you've had any type of trauma in your life, Bill and I would love to talk to you because we don't plan on stopping with the book that we have now. What we'd like to do is start compilations of like type stuff. So if a person feels, that they're being haunted, by ghosts and the ghosts keep reappearing, then hopefully we'll have a book that'll show, how you can grow through the trauma of that and how you can live through that and still build a healthy life. So prpconnect.org is our website. I try to keep up all of our podcasts and things like that. And our places that we're going to be, our appearances. I don't think I have anything on there right now. I just had foot surgery, so I apologize. If you want to be part of a study in the future, if you want to be interviewed or even to talk to us, contact us through email, and that is prpconnect@outlook.com. And then we also have a Facebook page, which is a little bit more active. It's Phenomenology Research Professionals. And you can contact either one of us on Facebook just by, looking up our names. You can also Google Kousoulas and, get information that way because there's not a lot of Kousoulas out there.
No, there's only one of a kind. Well, where can they get your book? That's more important.
Amazon, you can get it at Amazon.com, or when you go to their website, you can hit shop and there's a link to my metaphysical store. And we have a section that's just Phenomenology Research Professionals. And our book is on there as long as a few promo items.
Great.
Or just send us a message on Messenger and we're happy to send you an autographed copy as well.
Yeah, autographed copies will come from the website.
Okay, cool. I want one. Susy, go ahead. Anything coming up?
No, I'm working on a non-paranormal project right now, so I've kind of taken a step back. I do my YouTube channel is the Pukwudgie Whisperer. I'm not on any social media, so if you want to get a hold of me, you have to go into a swamp during the new moon at midnight, say my name 3 times, and then if your offering is good enough, I will show up. So that's how you get a hold of me if you need to.
I've been trying to find her for a year. That's the truth.
I'm a bit mysterious. Sometimes I just show up.
You're saying we got very lucky tonight.
Yeah.
I did that, but I only said her name twice, and I suffered the consequences. Let me tell you.
Nice.
Steve, I have a podcast called The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. One of my co-hosts is Susy Bastille. The other one is Andy Mercer. our producer and co-host from across the ocean. It's been around for about 5.5 years with a hiatus now and then. And coincidentally, we've talked to Bill and Jackie Kousoulas on the show and Richard Hatem. So we've had some pretty good guests over the years. I have a book out that I co-wrote with Mark Randall. Mark Randall is a graphic artist. This book is called Mothman High Strangeness. It follows the year of the Garuda, the year of the Mothman. It has everything in it. He and I wrote the pieces for it. But I do want to leave with a thought here. There's no downside to this, to what we're doing. On the positive side, it's fun to come to the festival, the museum. There's no shame in buying a Mothman T-shirt to support the effort. There's also there's the fun, but there's the intrigue, the mystery. I mean, I remember coming down. I was down here briefly in '77 in Point Pleasant, but it's the mystery, the intrigue about the Mothman and everything surrounding it is never dulls. And I also invite people to investigate the prophecies side of the Mothman prophecies, which often gets overlooked. Now, on the other side is a lot of people, ordinary people, have extraordinary experiences, and they feel very alone sometimes. But if you come to the museum, come to an event, come to this, in this arena, you're going to meet other people that have also had very strange experiences. Even if it isn't identical, you can network with those people and understand you're not alone, you're not crazy. And it's really important to get that kind of support. So there's no downside to any of this.
Amen to that. Great. How about you, Rich? Anything coming up you want to share? Your website, your podcast?
Yeah. First, I just want to say how fortunate I feel to have met all of you quite recently, and how many wonderful people have come into my life as a result of writing the movie. And so we go back to John Keel and Mothman, and I can thank them all for the way things have turned out. I'm constantly every day faced with all the great things that have happened because of work that's gone before me, but because of the movie. And I'm just so glad and fortunate to have met all of you. And if anyone wants to hear any more from me, please go and check out my podcast, Richard Hatem's Paranormal Bookshelf. And you can hear it anywhere you hear podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you like. Check it out, and then shoot me an email off my website and let me know what you think.
All right, awesome. So as we have only a few minutes left of the Out of This World podcast, again, I want to thank all you guys for doing the roundtable. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. I had a lot of fun. I hope everybody did. On kind of like Steve's notion and last train of thought there, I couldn't agree with him more. I think it should be left as a mystery. It should be left with an open mind. It should be continued to investigate, because, we've only, like what he used earlier in tonight's episode, which is we've only reached the tip of the iceberg of all the research you guys have done. And there's so much more to explore. And I really wish more people would be more open-minded like yourself. And I commend all of you for doing the research that you do and putting yourselves out there, putting your reputations out there. You all bring something different to the table, and I appreciate that as coming from a paranormal investigator myself, and the work that you guys put out there on your own time. We all don't get paid to what we do, and we all have a passion for what we do, and I just think there's not enough people to take the time and say, I appreciate you guys, and what you do. I do. I appreciate it, and give you guys a pat on the back and a round of applause for what you guys do. I appreciate it.
Well, come to the Mothman Museum on Saturdays, and I'll show you around. I'll even show you the shiny hiney, and I'm not going to elaborate on that.
Yeah. We have children watching, so
That's right. Oh, sorry. You can believe that.
Yeah. No, thank you for the invitation. I definitely, it's on my bucket list. I'm gonna come next year, absolutely 100%. I can't wait to come and meet everybody and have a good time down there. So, any last minute thoughts, guys? You guys want to add anything before I go ahead and end the show? We'll start with Rich. Rich, you want to add anything?
No, I'm good. I'm just so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on
Good.
and for hosting the roundtable.
Yeah, great. So, anybody else want to add anything? Or are
I
you good?
do. I do.
Go
And
ahead.
it's only to plug Mark Randall. Because Steve said, don't forget about the prophecy side of the Mothman prophecy, which is really important as well. He just posted a picture. He does the wonderful photography of Princess Moon Owl on
Oh,
Facebook.
yes.
And it is awesome. I told him I want a copy of it. He is not available yet, but he's going to try to make it happen for me. So I hope he really does, because that is a very important part. And the artwork is excellent.
His artwork and his concepts of the entire realm of the paranormal are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Great.
Two things I'd like to mention, if I could, and that is, I want to echo what Susy was saying about the Mothman being one of the lesser interesting parts of the Mothman prophecies, because the prophecies in the Long Island piece with J.P. Perrow and Apol and all that stuff that was going on, the channeling Martin Luther King, that stuff was so fascinating. But the thing I really wanted to highlight, Jackie made this comment to me last night. We decided to watch the movie last night just to kind of be up to speed 100%, as if I would need that.
And we cry. We cry every time now since our
ever since we interviewed the people for our book, we can't see the bridge fall without tearing up. We can't, because now it's not just a movie. Now it's real to us. And so I just wanted to share that.
And Bill, when I came down to my first Mothman festival in 2006, and I met the people and saw the town. I mean, I'd seen it briefly before years ago, but driving home, my then wife and we were reading the Mothman Prophecies book out loud while we were driving. And when it came to that last chapter about the bridge collapse, it really hit home.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I wish you well and good luck in all your future endeavors and projects and all those good things you guys have coming up. I plan to get everybody's books. I hope to get autographs. Yeah, I hope to meet everybody in person soon rather than later. And I wish everybody well. Thank you for doing tonight's podcast. Want to always thank our viewers and listeners. Of course, they're always our first priority of Out of This World podcast. Want to thank all of our listeners and viewers that tuned in, that watched tonight, and hopefully everybody enjoyed tonight's show. We'll end it there, guys. Have a great night. It was great seeing everybody, and you guys take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Matthew.
Good night, everybody. Thanks,
Good night.
Matthew.